Alright, now we're going to get into factoring. The first part we need to know about factoring talks about having greatest common factors and finding greatest common factors. So what I want to do is first of all talk about just numbers when we are doing greatest common factors. So let's look at these numbers 20, 24, and 100. What I'm trying to find is the greatest common factor, which is the largest number that divides into your list. So here's, the book will show you, as you can see in this example, they have created the prime factorization for each number, and then they look to see what's in common to all three. I like to make a list. So I look at the smallest number and I make a list. 1 times 20 is 20. 2 times 10 is 20. 3 doesn't go into 20 evenly. 4 times 5 is 20. 5 times 4 is 20. When I start repeating factors that I've already got listed, I know my list is complete. So there's my list. So then I look to see in this list what other numbers go into 24 and 100. So I always pick the smallest because it's going to be the smallest list. So 1 goes into all of them, so that works. 2 goes into all of them, that's higher, so 2 is the highest right now. 4 goes into 24 6 times, 4 goes into 100 25 times, that one works. 5 does not go into 24, 10 does not go into 24, 20 doesn't go into 24, so 4 would be the greatest common factor. So to me it's easier just to make a list than it is to do the prime factorization. So if I'm looking at 16, 24, and 40, I'm going to take 16 and I'm going to say 1 times 16 is 16, 2 times 8 is 16, 3 doesn't go into 16, 4 times 4 is 16, and then I'd be repeating myself. So here's my list. So out of this list of 6 numbers, which ones go into 24 and 40? 1 does, 2 does, 4 goes into all 3 of them. Does 8? 8 goes into 24 3 times, 8 goes into 40 5 times, so that one works. 16 does not go into 24 or 40, so 8 would be my greatest common factor. Now, when we have variables, we need to choose with the variables for our greatest common factor. So for variables, the GCF will be the lowest exponent, or lowest degree, however you want to say it. So if I'm looking at the greatest common factor for this expression, first of all with my numbers, I've got 8, so 1 times 8 is 8, 2 times 4 is 8, 3 doesn't go into 8, 4 goes back into 8, but it's already listed. So of these 4 numbers, which ones go into 20 and 12? Well, 4 goes into both of them, 8 doesn't go into both of them, so 4 is my GCF of my numbers. And then I look at my x's. Do I have x's in all the terms? And I do. So I choose the smallest exponent, which would be x squared. So 4x squared is my GCF. Same thing for this bottom one. I've got 18a cubed b squared, 24 a to the 4th bc. So for 18, I've got 1 times 18, 2 times 9, 3 times 6, 4 doesn't go into it, 5 doesn't go into it, 6 goes 3 times. I've already got it listed, so here's my list. So which of these numbers is the highest number that goes into 24? That would be 6, so 6. Now look at my a's. Do I have a's in both? Yes, I do. The lowest exponent is a cubed, so that's the a part. Do I have b's in both? I do. B to the 1 is the lowest exponent. Do I have c's in both? I do not. I have a c in the second one, but not in the first one. So the c can't be listed in my greatest common factor. So it's just 6a cubed b. Okay, so moving right along, I'm going to skip this one. We're going to look at this in the middle of the page. What if we have a binomial factor? If you look at this one, when I have this factored out, what's in common between these two terms? The 2y plus 7. So the 2y plus 7 is the greatest common factor of this one, because this whole 3x times 2y minus 7 is one term. The negative 4 times 2y or plus 7 is a term. So 2y plus 7 is what's in common. Remember, I'm looking for greatest common factor. So looking at the one below it, what do you think the common factor is? what's in both terms. If you said 3b plus 8, you would be correct. That is what's in both terms. Alright, so let's look at what we're actually going to be doing. We're going to actually be factoring out the greatest common factor. So the first thing we need to do is find the GCF. So if I'm looking at 20x to the 5th minus 8x to the 4th plus 12x squared. We did this one on the other page, and we found that the GCF was 4x squared. I believe, yep, we did that on the other page. We found the GCF was 4x squared. So what you're going to do to factor out the greatest common factor, the 4x squared, we are dividing it out of each term. So I'm going to write it under each term. 4x squared, 4x squared, 4x squared. So my GCF goes in front. There's my GCF. And then the remainders, when I do the division, go in the parentheses. So divide out each one separately. 20 divides by 4 5 times. X to the 5th over x squared. You subtract your exponents. 5 minus 3 would be x cubed. And then I've got a negative. 8 divided by 4 is 2. X to the 4th over x squared. 4 minus 2 is 2, so I have an x squared. Then for the last one, 12 divided by 4 is 3, and the x squareds would cancel. So here is my factored form. Now, is there a way to check that? What do you think? Is there a way to check it? Yes, there's a way to check it. If I've distributed 4x squared and I cleared my parentheses, I should end up with the 20x to the 5th minus 8x to the 4th plus 12x squared when I distribute the 4x squared. So these are all checkable. See if you got it right. Okay, let's look at this one. It's got more than one variable per term, so I might have P's and Q's in my GCF. So GCF, for my numbers, I've got 42, 14, and 7. Well, 7 is the highest number that goes into all of those. And then for the P's, I have P's in every term. The lowest exponent is the P to the 1 here in this middle term. For Q's, I have Q's in all of them, and it looks like Q squared is the smallest of the exponents. So to do GCF, I'm going to have 7pq squared is going to go, and then I'm going to take that out of each of these. 7pq squared, 7pq squared. So now do the division. 42 divided by 7 is 6. P cubed over p to the 1, 3 minus 1 would be p squared. Q squared cancel. Plus 14 divided by 7 is 2. The p's cancel in this one, and the q squareds cancel. So I just have a 2. Minus 7 divided by 7 is 1. I'll put the 1 there, you don't have to, unless everything else cancels. P to the 4th over p to the 1, 4 minus 1 would be p cubed. Q to the 4th over q squared, 4 minus 2 would be q squared. And there's my answer. So how can you check a factorization? You can distribute and see if you get your original problem. Okay, let's look at this one in the middle of the page. 16 minus 8, 16b to the 5th minus 8b to the 4th plus 24b cubed. My GCF, look at my smallest number, 8. Does 8 go into both 16 and 24? I'm going to try that first, and it does, so I know 8 is my number part. I have b's in all the terms, and so b cubed looks like it's the smallest of the exponents. So I'm going to have 8b cubed, and let's see what we have left over. I'll put 8b cubed underneath each one. So 16 divided by 8 is 2. B to the 5th over b cubed, 5 minus 3 would be b squared. Minus, the 8's would cancel. B to the 4th over b cubed, 4 minus 3 would be a b to the 1. So just put a b. Plus 24 divided by 8 is 3. B cubed divided by b cubed. Boom, there we're done. Okay, I'm going to work a couple of these negative factor ones. They give us quite a few, but we're not going to encounter them real often, but we're going to go ahead and do it. It says to factor out a -4. Anytime you have a leading term with a negative in it, most of the time you're going to be factoring out that negative with it. So in this case, they want us to take out a -4. So I'm going to take out a -4 because 4 would be the GCF of 8, 12, and 4. And since I have a negative for my first term, I'm going to take out that negative with it. So negative 4 is going to come in front. Negative 8 divided by negative 4 gives me positive 2y squared. 12 divided by negative 4 gives me negative 3, and then I still have the y. 4 divided by negative 4 is negative 1. Okay, so the GCF for this next problem would be, for the numbers it would be 3, and then for the variables it would be x squared, because those are the smallest of the exponents. But since I have a negative in the front, I'm going to take out a negative 3x squared from each of these. So negative 3x squared goes in front. Negative 12 divided by negative 3 is positive 4. X to the 4th over x squared. 4 minus 2 is 2, so I have x squared. Negative 6, negative 3, that's going to give me positive 2. X cubed over x squared leaves me an x. 9 divided by negative 3 is negative 3, and the x squareds would cancel. So that's how you do it if you have a leading term that has a negative, if I'm going to divide that out. So I'm going to skip these next two because they're doing the same thing. Let's go down here and let's just practice again. If I have a greatest common factor, I have, I'm looking at these and I'm looking at parentheses. In this case, my GCF is the a plus b, that whole parentheses. So if I follow the same pattern of what I've been doing, and I'm going to take an a plus b out from each one of these, let's see what it looks like. So I've always put the GCF in the front, so a plus b goes in the front, and then whatever's left over is going to go in my second parentheses. Well, if I take out a plus b from that term, I'm going to have a 2x left. If I take a plus b out of the middle term, I'm going to have minus 3y left. And if I take out a plus b from the last term, I'm going to have a plus 8. So that's kind of what that looks like. Let's look at this bottom one. Again, the GCF is x plus 6. So x plus 6 goes in the front because that's what I'm taking out. And then remember, I'm writing it underneath. You don't have to write it underneath every time when you're doing this one, because if you recognize what's going to be left over. So what's left over would be a 2x and a minus 5 to go in the second parentheses. What this is leading to is the next page, because the next page we're going to be factoring by grouping. So here's factoring by grouping. So far we have done GCF. And so our first step when we are factoring is to look for GCF. And I have a handout that I'll make available that gives us all of our options when we are factoring, the questions we should be asking ourselves. And when we move later on and we keep going with the videos, I'll be asking these questions. So you always ask yourself, can I take out a GCF? That's the first thing I do. So no matter how many terms I have, I'm going to look to see, can I make my number smaller by taking out a number that's in common or a variable that's in common. Alright, so then after that, we're going to ask ourselves, how many terms do we have? Well, if I could spell. Let's see if I can spell it right this time. How many terms? And so as we move through the sections, I'm going to be talking about how to treat different numbers of terms. So the first one we're going to do is if we have 4 terms. We do a method called grouping. Now grouping means putting some things together. So this is what we do when we group. We're going to put the first 2 and the last 2 terms together. Now, before I did that though, I should have said, is there a greatest common factor? So is there a number that'll go into 4, 3, 20, and 15? No, there's not one that'll go into all 4. Okay, so then I look to see, do I have a variable in every single one of them that I can take out? I don't have an x in this last term right here, so I cannot take a variable out from all of them. So I move on to how many terms do I have, and I have 4, so I have grouping. And so now I'm grouping the first 2 and the last 2. Now, we're going to now just take the first 2 terms like they were a problem just by themselves, and we're going to look for a GCF in each parentheses now. So for 4x cubed minus 3x squared, I can't take a number from 4 and 3. There's not a number that goes into both of those besides 1. But for x cubed and x squared, the smallest of the exponents is x squared. So I'm going to take an x squared out of this first parentheses. When I do that, I'm going to have a 4, and then x cubed over x squared leaves me an x. I'm going to have a 4x minus The 3 didn't cancel with anything, but the x squareds cancel, so 4x minus 3. Now move on to the second parentheses. And I'm not even looking at 4x cubed minus 3x squared anymore. I'm looking at the negative 20x plus 15. What do they have in common? Well, a 5 will go into both of those. Okay, so I know I'm going to do a 5. I can't take out an x because the 15 doesn't have an x. Now, remember what I just said on the previous page. If you have a negative with the leading term, and remember this parentheses is now its own problem. If you have a negative with that leading term, you need to take that negative out with it. So I'm going to divide out a negative 5 from each of these. So when I do that, negative 20 divided by negative 5 gives me 4, and I have an x left with it. 15 divided by negative 5 is a negative 3. Now, what do you notice about the parentheses? The parentheses match. And the parentheses need to match at this point in grouping, or something has not worked with grouping. If your parentheses don't match exactly, then something is not right. Either if their numbers are the same, the terms are the same, but the signs are off, check that negative right there in the middle. Check that. That'll be the first indication. Okay, so now, the previous page, remember, if we had a common factor, we brought it down. 4x minus 3 is now the GCF. So remember, I'm taking 4x minus 3 out of each of these. So if I took a 4x minus 3 out of the first term, I'd have x squared left over. Minus, if I took 4x minus 3 out of the second term, I would have 5 left over. So now I have factored that 4-term problem. Once you get down to the 2 parentheses, pretty much it's factored. Okay, let's try another one. The more you try a factoring, the better they get, the easier they get. Okay, so I look for a GCF first. Remember, that's going to be my first step. I can't take a number out of all 4 of these, and I don't have a y with the 3, so there's no GCF. So how many terms? Four. That means we need to group. So I'm going to group the first 2 and the last 2. So in the first 2, between 6 and 2, I could take out a 2, and then I've got a y squared and a y, so a y could come out. So 2y, 2y. So I'm left with 2 goes into 6 3 times. Y squared over y is y, minus 2y divided by 2y is a 1. Okay, move to the second parentheses. For 9 and 3, I could take out a 3. And that, I can't take out a y because I don't have a y with 3. But I need to take out a negative because I have a negative with that 9. So I'm going to take out a negative 3. So that's going to leave me 3y minus 1. Parentheses match. Now, if I had not done the negative 3 in that second parentheses, my signs would be off. Okay, so now, last step in grouping, bring down that matching parentheses now, the 3y minus 1. And then, if we took those out, we would have a 2y minus 3 left over. There's my greatest common factor. Okay, let's try another one. Like I said, the more you try, well, actually, this is the same as one at the top of the page. So we're going to go to the next page. We don't have to do ones over again. Alright, so let's look at this one. Now, look at my directions. Factor completely. When you have a test, that's what the directions are going to say, is factor completely. So you've got to ask yourself these questions each time. GCF. And right now, since this is the first section we've really talked about, we don't have that many steps right now. So how many terms? Okay, GCF, 240, 150, and 30. I know that 10 at least will go into all of those. 20 won't go into 30, or let's look at 30. 30 will go into 150, but it won't go into 40. So 10 is my GCF number part. Then, do I have an M in all of these? Yes, I do. The lowest exponent in the M's is an M to the 1. So I can take out a 10M from all 4 before I go to grouping. So 10 goes into 200 20 times, and I took out one of those M's, so I have an M squared. Minus 10 goes into 40 4 times, took out one of those M's, so I just have an M left. Minus 10 goes into 150 15 times, I took out one of the M's, and I still have a T with it. Needed to make my parentheses a little longer. Shouldn't put an ending on it yet. Alright, then the last one, 10 goes into 30 3 times. I took out this m, but I still have the 2. Alright, so that's what I have left when I take out a 10m. Now, the 10m is not going to become a part of my grouping that I'm going to do. I'm going to circle it, and I'm going to draw me a little arrow, because that reminds me to put the 10m in my final answer, but it's not going to come into play in what I'm about to do. So now I have 4 terms. They don't have a GCF anymore, because I just took it out. So let's group the first 2 and the last 2. In the first 2, 4 and 20, I can take out a 4, and then m squared and m, I can take out an m. So I'm going to take out a 4m. So that leaves me with 5m minus 1. In the second parentheses, 3 and 15, I can take out a 3, and they have an mt and a t, so I can take out a t. And I have a negative in front of the 15, so I need to take out negative with it. So negative 3t, negative 3t. Let's see what we get. 15 and 3, that gives me a 5, and it's going to be positive because I got 2 negatives. Took out the t, so I have an m. And then 3t divided by negative 3t gives me minus 1. Aha, my parentheses match. That's very important. So bring down the matching parentheses, 5m minus 1. And then the numbers, the GCFs that I pulled out in the middle, go in their own parentheses. 4m minus 3t. And then don't forget, at the very beginning we took out a 10m, so we just put it right in the front. And there we go. Okay, let's do one more like that, and then we are done with grouping. So 6ab squared, let's see if there's a GCF. I believe a 3 at least will go into all of those. So let's take out a 3. I've got a squared, an a is in all of them, but I don't have a b in all of them. So 3a is my GCF. So let's divide out a 3a. 3 goes into 6 2 times. I took out an a from an a squared, so I have an a, and I didn't do anything with the b. Plus 3 goes into 30 10 times. I took out the a, I have the b left. Minus 3 goes into 9 3 times. I took out one of those a's. Minus 3 goes into 45 15 times, and I took out the a. Okay, now, so let's remember the 3a, draw us a little arrow so we don't forget to put in our final answer. And then let's move on, and we're going to group these 4. For 2a and 2ab and 10, I can take out a 2, and a b is in both of those. So I'm going to take out a 2b. So I'm going to have 2, and the b's cancel, and a, plus 2 goes into 10 5 times, the b's cancel. Okay, for the second parentheses, I'm going to take out a 3. That'll go into both of them, and I need to take out a negative. You should have plenty of practice with taking out this negative. You don't have to do it every time, but if there's a negative right here on this third term, you're going to have to. So I'm taking out a negative 3, and so I'm going to have an a plus 5 left. My parentheses match, so I know I'm good there. So bring down the matching parentheses, and then the 2b minus 3 go together. And then don't forget our 3a that we took out at the beginning. That would be factoring completely with grouping. Y'all have a wonderful rest of the day.